Welcome to Business Technicalities. About 1 year after the merger. It's been a couple extra days, so it is the 15th. So
it's about a year and 11 days since we signed it. I think it was. Maybe it's like the 8th, right? Like we didn't actually.
We signed it actually, yeah,
after the first.
After the first because of the 4th of July holiday. Yeah. But the merger has gone well. Me and Jason are putting together a talk we submitted on this, yep. And this is essentially going to be a review of all the things we're going to talk about and some of the things of how a successful merger should go, because a year later, we're happy. The company is now hitting bigger numbers than expected.
Yes.
So financial projections were actually a little off, but to the better because more things came in.
Still off. Off is off, but yes.
Off is off, yeah. I mean, you want to accurately predict things.
Yes.
That's a whole different talk. We won't get sidetracked with that one right there. But for sure, we wanted to talk about something that someone said to me, which is, hey, you and Jason don't seem to hate each other. And I thought that was a really fun way to start the conversation with someone. And I'm like, well, why would we hate each other? Like, oh, because you merged. And some people don't have a good time with that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone seems to drive down that road eventually. And I mean, there's been rocky. There's been somewhat contentious. I don't think we've yelled at each other.
No. We've disagreed on things, but brought data to the table and made a rational decision. So that's life.
We've yelled at other people, but
there's been a lot of that. Merging the teams. We'll get to that a few steps down. But a couple of the first things I'll start with were for yourself. If you're thinking about selling your IT MSP company and you plan to stay on board, that is a prerequisite for this video. If you plan to exit and you don't care about the rest, it doesn't matter. And if you're exiting, you just want the biggest check possible, and that's a different video altogether. But if you plan to be involved, as I am, be prepared to sell. That is a big thing. Be prepared to let go of the fact that you will no longer be president of the company. That was a predefined thing.
Yes. And you flaunt it.
Yes.
Very much. You flaunt the fact that
it's a Jason problem now.
Oh, yeah. Which is okay. I signed up for it and knew exactly what we were going into getting there. So that's the other side of that, is be prepared for that if you're not on the other side of it, right? Be prepared to go back to being an individual contributor, essentially.
Yeah, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I was mentally and emotionally prepared for those things. I think they're important. I wore the hat as the president, the business owner. I know what it takes to do it. I don't want to do it. And that was the reason I wanted to sell. It's not the thing I want to do anymore. I love hands-on tech. That was like, what's going to make me happy? I know too many business owners, I think, get caught up in all these different groups of, you need to be an entrepreneur, get your fingers off the keyboard. And I think it's pushing some people in the wrong direction for where they should be. I did not scale my company to 10,000 people, nor would I ever be the person to scale a company to some mega size. It's just not what I do. And that's why I figured it was time for me to exit and do what I'm good at and what also makes me happy.
I mean, I think society, to a limited extent, puts this pressure on you to like, oh, you need to be a manager or a supervisor or own a company, right? And not everyone's cut out for that.
No.
Right? Like, a lot of people end up really, really miserable. And what is it? Peter Principal. Yeah, that you end up getting promoted in that role. You end up one level higher than you can competently do, and then you lose that job because you're not very good at it. And we fight that every day, even after the merger, with some of the roles with people and where they've ended up.
Yeah, so it's one of those things like this is the decision I made to do that I knew I didn't want to be the president of the company. I was willing to be a contributor and be on staff. And the next thing is mutual respect and shared vision. Me and Jason hung out quite a few times. We actually did a talk together. Yep. We BS'd a lot and kind of realized we're on the same thing. We're both kind of on a mission to educate people about security, raise the bar for things, educate the community. I'm like, wow, cool. Not just we have shared personal visions, we also have shared business visions of how the business should be done, leading security first. So this made it easy, I was like, cool, I respect this guy. And if you don't respect the person you're merging with, you're going to have a really bad time. There was a lot of talk about where the company should be. We've tuned and adjusted a little bit, like number of employees, but it's been over really good, engaging discussion because I do have a role in leadership. So it's kind of been, I sit at the table with you on this when we've talked about why we do the things we do, thought about different, more rational ways to do it.
Yeah, and just a lot of that is just built over time, right? It's like I have a vision for where I want the company to go, but then you get there and you're like, well, now what, right? And then you maybe just modify the vision. We will get to a point where I just won't want to get any bigger, right?
Yeah.
We'll just hold there.
Yeah, we thought we knew where that was in the beginning, and I was fine with it, but we've actually all had a really good conversation about that number being a little bit higher.
It's not a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. transparently, I don't want to own a company where I don't know everyone's name.
Yeah.
Like that is literally one of the benchmarks I am presently judging success by, is that I've worked for those companies and they turn into soulless monstrosities,
Yes.
and I don't want to run a soulless monstrosity.
Come back to the shared vision of
Yeah.
not wanting to work at a soulless monstrosity. There's a reason I don't work in corporate world. And he used to work in corporate world as well. And there's a reason you're not there anymore. A couple of things that were important to me, and it's equity over just salary. So yes, I have a pay check that I get, but also equity. And this is where I've seen a lot of people really hammer on this. Equity is dilution of your company, which technically, because I'm bringing equity to the table, it doesn't dilute you that much. It does. It's very different.
This was actually the biggest struggle with Alan. He talked about it a little at our all hands, that he was the thing holding it back, and he was. And literally, this was the issue. He's like, well, I don't want to give up equity. And I'm like, but you're giving up X amount of equity of Y amount of revenue, which starts out revenue neutral for you, right? It's like we organize this in such a way that it was based on EBITDA, essentially, right? And in percentage of EBITDA of the total overall company that came out of it. And it worked out. I think it worked out okay.
Oh, yeah. And just for context, for those that haven't been following the channel, Alan's the original founder of CNWR. Jason's been in the process of purchasing from Alan. So I actually ended up buying shares from Alan.
Yeah, we have 4 owners, right?
Yeah.
Like now, because Tom is an owner, and then Matt has a small stake as well. And one of the big things that if you're looking to do this, that you might want to do to prepare to do it, is if you're an LLC, you're probably better off being an S corp, honestly, because you have shares then, right? It's not members of the organization, so it makes it a lot easier to handle winding and unwinding and these split amounts of money and how people are paid. It's just a little bit better corporate structure, I feel like, to have acquisitions going on.
Yeah. Negotiating a non-compete is interesting, and something you have to realize that there's going to be lock-ins on. You're not like a normal employee where they're just trying to lock you in. You're someone who built a business. You have all these contacts. It is expected that you will not solicit those contacts to go somewhere else. This is not like an employee non-compete type thing. This is very specifically you negotiating the business, and you have some restrictions that may come with it. So make sure you're fine with that. That's just going to be part of the deal.
And the courts have thrown out a lot of non-competes, but like the one spot that is still very enforceable is this specific situation.
This is not the non-competes that are thrown out from employees. These are very different than that.
And there's a non-compete associated with it, and then there's a non-solicit, right? The non-solicited goes for a little bit longer, right? Like that's, just trying to make sure on the receiving end that I don't buy something that you turn around and then just rebuild.
Right.
Like it's
because some people do that, or even that's a whole other. Just expect to comply with it, and feel free to make sure you understand those terms. Exit strategy, I think, is an important one as well, because you have to think about it. As a business owner, you're usually building a business to a point of exit. So there is some money that goes back and forth, and then the shares come in there. But then you have to make sure each people know at some point, I may want to retire. So how those shares can have a value that can be bought out later, and that's part of the negotiation process and part of the contract.
Yeah, and luckily, as an S corp, we actually already had a lot of that documentation in place, right? Because we already had multiple owners, right? So there are limitations on how he can sell his shares, or how even I can sell my shares. There's essentially a right of first refusal that, like, we have to authorize the sale or we can buy them back, and you can obligate us to buy them back. Right, but you can't just go sell them to the guy down the road.
Yeah, that's once again, we're S corp. You can't do that. So that's you want to make sure that's all negotiated prior to the signatures. Don't do it after. We had all that in place. Be open and honest. There's no reason to try to hide the dead bodies or fluff your numbers somewhere. Don't do that. Be as transparent, even with things that you think may not matter. Put them in writing, just so you don't want to ever come off as not being transparent. So I laid it all on the table. Jason had me massage numbers differently. He had some questions, which is expect that too. So I made sure I put them in the most clear way so you could read and understand what you're buying.
Yeah, 100%. I knew what I was getting into. I knew the types of clients, the quality I'll use of the clients, and the varied amount of it. We knew a lot about where the inbound leads were coming from, like what the actual value was, and in almost every case that the body you're burying will end up getting caught in due diligence. And if it doesn't get caught in due diligence, almost all of these agreements have some sort of earnout or some sort of like performance guarantee associated with them. And those bodies will come haunting back when that comes to fruition for sure.
Yeah, and part of this decision is especially because if you assume the other person's company, not do what I did with contracts. So Jason played it really safe by taking the clients, but not taking my company because you are liable. And I learned this about circa 2006, Tom, that I am liable for the companies that I take over for taxes that may have been owed or bodies that were buried prior to my owning of the company.
But even that, we had a client come back that you had sold a block hours to 18 months ago that didn't have an expiration on it and wanted to come back and use it. And I'm like, yeah, no, I didn't buy that. Right? Like it wasn't called out in the liabilities that I assumed. So
because I'd forgot about the client. And all I did was take the money and transfer it over to CNWR out of Lawrence Systems. I gave Jason the money for it. Now the client's got his hours, but those hours came with a new agreement and it's sorted out.
We worked it out.
Yeah, really simple stuff. But, it's good to keep those things top of mind. One of the things that made it a little bit easier is Jason already was a more mature MSP with a larger stack of tools, but we also used some of the same tools like Huntress or SentinelOne, and it was like easier to switch that. It's not that you can't buy a company that uses a completely separate set of tools. You have to take that into how long is it going to take you to migrate, because running two stacks means you're running two companies, and that's confusing.
I think we are a single stack now. I think it took about 8 months to get there.
Yep.
For every one of those tools, we assessed what the best solution of it was going to be. I mean, we're not completely single stack because there's still a bunch of clients running on Google Workspaces, but I mean, we're okay supporting that. We lead with Office 365, but we're fine supporting Google Workspaces. But like, things like Ninja versus Automate, we were using mostly Bitdefender, right? Like versus SentinelOne, our DNS filtering. There's a bunch of other things there. And, for every one of them, we did kind of a showdown of, okay, here's the features of this one versus the price. Here's the features of this one versus the price. May the best man win.
Yeah, and one of the nice things is when you have teams that have a lot of endpoints and some experience with it, because every salesperson tells you their product is amazing, it's sunshine and rainbows. It's nice that we get to experience of what we did or didn't like about the different tools, and it gave us a better assessment, especially because you're seeing them active on a large number of endpoints. So I think it offered us a lot of insight on there.
Yeah, we didn't get it completely right. There's I don't want to name any tools on here, but there's tools that we probably made the wrong decision on. And not necessarily the wrong decision, we just didn't understand the full big picture of it, largely because I think you guys were only using a subset of some of those features and we were using more. And when you looked at it at the bigger picture,
trying to use that tool for more just kind of became different problems.
So it's fine. Nothing that we're walking away from and nothing that we're going to unwind. But a couple things that we may have done differently again if we were doing it again.
Yeah. Assessing the talent and culture integration. Good news is company culture seemed pretty easygoing. We're all a bunch of tech nerds, and we actually did a dinner even before the merger. Everyone seemed to get along. We didn't have any problem there. Assessing the talent's really hard.
It's very hard.
And it's hard now that we have so many of us, even though we're integrated, having a good matrix of that is still on our roadmap to try to have a good talent map.
Yeah. I mean, and we still struggle on the tech side now. We're up to 13, 14?
16.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. 16. Yeah, because it was 8. Yeah, you're right. 16. And I still don't know who the best person to assign for certain types of projects is. For the common stuff, we have a pretty good idea, but then there's a bunch of ancillary stuff that's out on the edges that we don't do every day. And we are actually working on that project this quarter to try to finally create a matrix around that.
Yeah, that is one of the rocks we set to get that done. And it's a lot, but it's worth it because some people have these really weird, like they don't understand this thing over here, but then they have this really deep knowledge on this other thing over here. Like, wait a minute, you understand all of that, but you don't understand this, and making sure you know where all that is challenging.
It's super weird when some of those things. It seems like some of the knowledge they're missing would be a prerequisite to understand the other thing. And you're like, how do you understand that without understanding? It's usually networking knowledge.
Yes.
Like there's some core foundational networking knowledge that's missing, but they understand some really nuanced networking stuff as part of another hypervisor, whatever the case is. It's like, how do you not understand VLANs, but you can configure layer 3 routing very well? It's things like that.
Yeah, there's some of those that you're different people and making sure we're always leveling up our techs and training them, and we have a lot of stand-ups. There's a lot we're doing to bring them all to a higher level of knowledge. But when something is broken, figuring out exactly who to sell that or assign that to can be a little bit tricky sometimes, and make sure they have it the right way. I think the last one is something I've talked a lot about. Is this the last one we ever have anymore? Yeah, it's like the last topic we got on here. One team, one way. And I think we're there now.
We are. There are still, that's an LTS client, and you called out one that happened the other day, but I don't think it has anything to do with the sale when we use that nomenclature, and I think you corrected it right away.
Yeah.
It has to do with, you had two types of clients, and it has to do with the less mature client, not the fact that it was an LTS client.
Right. There's always the alignment of giving them on the same master service agreement, on the same stack and things like that. But once that's done, not wanting to service something to say, oh, that's just an LTS client. You want to make sure everyone looks at them all as the client.
The clients, yep.
Yeah, that's an important aspect of it. I didn't really think about that before merger. That came up much later after the merger.
It did, yeah. I mean, for a long time, it was that, right? It was like, this is an LTS client. I think for the first 3 months, we had the team split, right?
Yeah.
Like, we had still the LTS team, and that was for continuity more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
It very quickly became the case that
it took 3 months to merge the ticket system.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So. And I think now... Right, we do still have some even back to culture a little bit, we do still have a couple of the LTS guys that work remote that are a little bit more out on an island, but I generally feel that all of them are comfortable working on any of the clients, right? And we all do things the same way.
Yeah, we've brought everything into a single documentation because I used a wiki, he used Hoodoo. So we brought everything out of the wiki, documented in Hoodoo. That also presented a good learning opportunity because my staff knew how to read the wiki stuff really well, and they had to learn Hoodoo. And now they know Hoodoo. We're not endorsing any of these products.
Yeah, and they like it. Hoodoo's a little more structured with the data, whereas the wiki stuff is a little more free-formed. There were a lot of things like you data hoarded a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm very anti-data hoarding. So there's a lot of, that stuff that kind of went on. And, there were internal arguments about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it takes a long time. I mean, you didn't have a clear, and I think I would say most companies don't, have a clear data retention policy on things like that.
We didn't. You didn't either.
No, I didn't either.
Your data retention policy was hold it forever.
Yes.
Our data retention policy was generally hold it for 90 days, but it was really not enforced very well. And then there was a lot of like, oh, do we have that password for that client we installed that access point for 7 years ago? Yes, we do. It's like, I don't want that liability. So one of the first projects you actually ran internally was to help develop a data retention
policy. But I realized talking to other MSPs, I don't think that's a common thing that most of them have. If a client leaves, they don't necessarily delete all the data they may have, and
I don't want it.
No, it's a liability to have it. So there's a really good reason to keep that as short as possible. There's insurance reasons to do, because what if you ever have a breach? Suddenly you're calling this person you haven't talked to in 7 years because you have a password. Technically they're on the breach list. I don't even know if they still have that router, but you don't want that data because that's also you're holding on to liabilities.
And
not making money off them. So
and as a matter of fact, like we've even started with some of these clients where we've made attempts to give them their data. I have now for two separate clients sent their password list as certified mail. And then as soon as I got the return receipt that they received it, wiped the data. Just don't want it anymore.
Just didn't want it anymore. So we'll leave that with you, and maybe that could be a short video. Maybe I'll do that as a topic about we'll make public our data retention policy, just the policies that we use and how you could adopt these as well and why they're a good idea. That's a whole nother talk. But that's what we have here for the merger. It's all going well. And looking forward to all kinds of more fun as it goes on. We just had their company all hands meeting, everything went well. And me and Jason we were pretty ecstatic just seeing the whole team together, mixed people from all sides.
That was awesome. Like they all,
it was awesome.
Like when they got together, everyone seemed to have a good time.
They all went out to dinner.
The first time we all got together, it was definitely very cliquey as far as like at the hibachi place. There was literally an LTS table and a CNWR table. And it definitely wasn't the case this time.
Yeah, this time everyone sat with everyone. Everyone knew each other. It was awesome. So I'll leave you guys with that. that. So we're that all went well. All right, look for our talk. That's coming up on there. We'll
assuming they accept it, otherwise rejection con.
if not, we'll do a rejection con with it.
It'll be November.
All right, thanks everyone.
Yep. See ya.